We are on Chavtes Amud Beis, right? 29b. Got that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in the middle of a little bit of an in-depth discussion on Kal Vachomer and its usage to derive at varying degrees of impurity. So the last thing we had was Rabbi Yossi, all right, who taught us from a Kal Vachomer that there is a fourth degree of impurity for Kodesh, right? Morning hour. Right, so we have chulin, ordinary food, which has its degree of impurity. We have Truma, that which the Kohen eats, which is more spiritually sensitive and therefore has its degree of impurity. And it can receive impurity up to 3 degrees. 3 degrees. But not that it can confer from 3 to 4, but 3 is the end of the line. Remember, I mentioned this, that the term Tumah, impure, usually implies that it can confer to the next level. Whereas when you want to say that it stops here, it would say puzzle, invalid. That it itself is invalid, but doesn't go to the next level.
How do you measure 3 degrees?
3 degrees as in there's the primary, that touched one thing, that's 1. That touched another, that's 2. That touched another, that's 3. That's 3 degrees. And then in Kodesh, that is sacrificial food, it goes 4 degrees. So Rabbi Yossi told us that how do we conclude that a 4th degree of impurity exists in the realm of Kodshim, in the realm of sacrificial food. So you derive from a Kal Vachomer. What's the Kal Vachomer? The Kal Vachomer is from someone who is in the process of purification. In the process of purification, there are 3 stages, as we explained. The first is the person goes to the mikveh. That's stage 1. At that point, he is allowed and pure as far as ordinary food goes. Stage 1. But at this point, he would still confer impurity to Tumah, if he's a Kohen, to eating Tumah. And as well, he would certainly confer impurity to sacrificial food, to Kodshim. Stage 1. In stage 2, which is nightfall, he goes to mikveh during the day. Right? Women are the exception, they go to mikveh at night, but for the most part, it's mikveh during the day. So comes nightfall, and now he can eat his Truma. Now he can eat Truma. But he would still be impure as far as sacrificial food goes, as far as Kodshim goes. Right? So the first stage is called Tful Yom. He immersed himself during the day. The night comes, and he's called, and this is Herev Shemesh, the sun is set. At this point, he can eat Truma, but he's still not allowed to eat sacrificial food. And the final stage of purification is the next day when he brings his carbon. Until such point that he brings his carbon, he's called Mechusir Kippurim. He's lacking in atonement. He did everything else. He went to the mikveh. The night fell, but he's lacking atonement. At this point, the night fell, and the night before already, the sun set already, so he can eat his Tumah. But until such time that he brings his carbon, he cannot eat sacrificial food. He's still impure as far as sacrificial food goes.
The night falls for Mark.
Yeah. Actually, in fact, the Mishnah, the first Mishnah in the entire Talmud, the first Mishnah in Talmud describes when can you say Shema? When the Kohen comes on to eat Truma. That's what it's referring to. He's going to mikveh during the day, the sun is set. Now he's going to eat Truma. That's the time for the Shema, for the evening Shema. Okay, so at that point he can eat Truma, but he cannot eat sacrificial food yet until the next day after he brings his carbon. So said Rabbi Yossi, okay, this person who's gone to mikveh, and the night fell, so he can eat Truma, and yet is impure as far as sacrificial food goes, then how the more so a third degree impurity, which is impure as far as Teruma goes, certainly it would confer for sacrifice. It would confer a fourth degree into the sacrificial food. This is what Rabbi Yossi said. It's followed?
It's complicated.
It's complicated. The guy who's in this process of purification, he's almost done his purification process. He's only lacking the sacrificial offering the next day. At this point, he is pure as far as Teruma goes. So he's already in the lenient stage because he's pure as far as Teruma goes. And yet, he's still impure for Kodshim.
That means
So the more so,
a third degree, it has to be a fourth.
so that means how much more so?
Because
A third degree,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
If he's not conferring impurity that Teruma means, he doesn't have third degree impurity.
Well, it doesn't make a difference what impurity he has because he's in the stage of process of purification already. In other words, we're comparing the process of purification to the process of what's the opposite of
Impurity?
impurification, right? So if in the process of purification, right, someone is capable of not conferring to Teruma, but still retains the ability to confer to Kodshim, then certainly something which is in the process of depurification, of impurification, and is capable of conferring to Teruma, how much more so is capable of conferring to Kodshim? Right? That's what we're doing. We're comparing the purification to the depurification.
So why do we call it fourth degree then?
Because the third degree, we already established earlier, third degree is impure as far as Teruma goes.
Okay.
So much more so to confer to Kodshim, making Kodshim a recipient of a fourth degree. And this we derive from the fact that the person who is in his purification process, at the stage when he may eat Teruma, he still confers to Kodshim. So much more so, something which is itself forbidden to Teruma certainly would confer to Kodshim, would confer to sacrificial. This is what Rabbi Yossi told us. So now we're going to have Rabbi Yochanan, who's going to dispute this understanding. And the way he's going to dispute it is by telling us by telling us the law of an earlier stage in the purification process, during the stage when the person has gone to mikvah but the night hasn't fell yet, and examining that law, at least according to one opinion, Rabbi Yochanan will refute this. Then the Gemara is going to say, well, no, we're going with the other opinion. Okay, this is where we're going. Sorry?
That's the roadmap.
That's the roadmap. So now let's begin. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Tam beribi eini edeya. Mahu. The reason of this great scholar, Rabbi Yossi, I don't know what it is. I don't know why he's going with this logic. Yeah, you have it there. Rabbi Yochanan. It's about a little less. You have it?
Zakai?
No, a couple lines down. Tam beribi.
Okay.
You have it?
No, but I'll find it.
It should be the beginning of a line. It's past halfway.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you have it there or no?
But go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Tam beribi eini edeya mahu. The reason of this great scholar, Rabbi Yossi, I don't know what it is. You have it?
Yeah.
Sharei tshuvasa b'tzidoi. Because we have the counter argument to him right there with him. Namely as follows. You, Rabbi Yossi, derived from the person who is in the last stage of purification. So he's gone to mikvah, stage 1. The night settled, stage 2. And he's missing stage 3, he's missing the carbon the next day. And this person may eat Teruma, he's pure as far as Teruma goes, but is impure as far as Kodshim, as far as sacrificial food goes. And therefore you derive that someone who, a third degree, which is impure for Teruma, certainly confers to fourth degree Kodshim. That's what you said, Rabbi Yossi. But go back a stage. Go back one stage. A person who's gone to mikvah, but the night hasn't settled yet. What happens to food that he touches? So let's see. Food that is, it's that is impure because it touched someone who's gone to mikveh but nightfall hasn't come yet. Yoichiach, he will be the counter argument to Rabbi Yossi. That food. How's that? Shapasal b'truma, this food which touched the person who's gone to mikveh, the tful yoim.
Yeah, but he's okay for he's okay for chulin.
Oh, he's okay for ordinary food, but prosel b'truma, he would make that food item would become impure for truma. Yeah, but eino oisir revi b'kodesh. That food item, if it were to touch something else, it would make that thing impure, but it wouldn't make a fourth degree of kodshim.
So it would confer third degree impurity
to kodshim, not fourth, in itself. Yeah.
Okay.
So if that's the case, the very fact that something is impure for truma doesn't mean that it makes fourth degree impurity for sacrificial, because here you have a food item which is impure for truma because it touched someone who's gone to mikvah whose night hasn't fell yet, and yet it doesn't make fourth degree for kodshim.
So both truma and kodshim in that case would both have third degree.
And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Or even less, as we'll see in a moment. Right? So which means then that impurity for truma does not equal fourth degree for kodshim.
It's not proof positive.
It's not proof positive. So you are deriving from the fact that a person who is missing the last stage, he can't eat truma, but he confers for kodshim. So how much more so someone who is forbidden to truma all certainly confers to kodshim. But here we have a situation where something is impure for truma, this food item that touched someone who's gone to mikveh but night hasn't fell yet. It's impure for truma, and yet does not confer fourth degree on kodshim.
Yeah, just like truma.
That's it. Just like truma itself. That's right. So the truma and kodshim seem to be separate tracks.
So
don't
pretty
tenuous.
It's tenuous.
Yeah. So let's see. So how do we know that this is indeed the case with respect to food item that touches someone who's at full yard? Yeah. So now we're following. So now what we're doing is we're going to look at the law of someone who's gone to mikveh. Night hasn't fell yet. What's the law of the food he touches? And we're going to see that the sages, so there's going to be a three-way dispute, Abba Shaul, Rabbi Meir, and the sages. Yeah. And at this point, the assumption is Rabbi Yossi follows the sages, because the sages is the majority. Yeah. And so we would assume that Rabbi Yossi follows the majority, as opposed to Rabbi Yossi following one of the other two minor opinions. One of the two opinions that are in the minority, Abba Shaul or Rabbi Meir. So what we're focusing here is the sages' opinion, who are of the view, as we'll see in a moment, that food would touch someone who's gone to mikveh but the night hasn't fell yet, doesn't confer fourth degree on kodshim, even though it itself is impure as far as truma goes.
That's Rabbi Yochanan.
This is what Rabbi Yochanan is counter argument to Rabbi Yossi.
Yeah.
Because you presumably Rabbi Yossi follow the sages, and the sages would undermine your logic. The Gemara is going to say no. Rabbi Yossi follows Abba Shaul, one of the other opinions, but then the Gemara is going to counteract that also. But we'll go stage by stage.
Okay.
So let's see. So now what we're doing is we're looking at the law of someone who's gone to mikveh. Night hasn't set yet. So he's pure as far as chulin goes. He can eat ordinary food. No impurity imparted. But he does impart impurity as far as truma goes. So what's the law of the food that he touches? Okay. The Tanya food we've learned. Abba Shaul says, Tful yoim, a person who has gone to mikveh, but the night hasn't settled yet. So he's immersed in daytime. That's what tful yoim is. He's immersed in daytime. He's immersed in that day. Night hasn't settled yet. So he's only got stage one of his purification. So there's a special law, says Abba Shaul, that as far as kodshim goes, as far as sacrificial food goes, we turn him into tchil l'kodesh. We turn him into a person impurity number one as far as kodshim goes. Meaning, he himself, how is he impure? This person is going through purification. Well, maybe he's a second degree. Right? Maybe he touched a sheretz. He himself, if he touched a corpse, then he would be a primary. But it's possible he didn't, right? It's possible he's impure because he touched a sheretz. He touched one of the impure, creepy crawlies. So he's a second degree only, or first degree, which would mean he only has 2 more to go. Second, touching something else, making third, and at worst, touching another one, making number 4. But, says Rabbi Shaul, we take this guy and turn him into a primary, or turning him into a 1.
When it's Kodshim only?
Only when it's Kodshim.
My law. Primary.
That's right.
No matter what he touches.
That's right. Mila asib Kodshim. It's a, Mila means like a elevation, a special status we give to sacrificial food, that we turn this person who's gone to mikvahs, the night hasn't settled, we turn him into a number 1. And therefore, latame shnayim, therefore he can make 2 degrees of impurity. He touches something, it becomes impure. That thing touches something else, it becomes impure. The livsel echad, and then that can in turn make something else impure, but it stops there.
1, 2, 3.
Him being number 1, 2, 3,
He
4.
prefers 1. He's primary. So
No, sorry, he becomes number 1, not primary. He turns it into a number 1.
Oh, number 1.
He turns into a number 1. Yeah, so he impures 2 to 1, 3, 4. So this is exactly like Rabbi Yossi. Right, Abba Shaul is exactly like Rabbi Yossi. Abba Shaul concluded, right?
Yeah.
Abba Shaul concluded that from a kol kavachomer, he concluded that Kodshim could be a recipient of number 4. So Abba Shaul would follow exactly this Rabbi Yossi, but we're going to see in a moment why the Gemara is not happy with Rabbi Yossi being parallel to Abba Shaul, as I mentioned. So for now, we're going to assume that Rabbi Yossi should be following the sages who disagree with this premise and therefore becomes Rabbi Yochanan's question on Rabbi Yossi. Clear?
I can never understand why, when you go into a mikveh, you come out, you're purified. Why do you have to wait till night?
So the Torah says,
There's no explanation.
all the laws of purity and impurity are super rational. The whole idea you touch something and now you can't eat something, and it's all. We explained this in previous classes. You have to think of it as a spiritual virus. You know, when you get rid of a virus in your body, let's say there's 3 stages to the purification process, right? There's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and that's kind of what's happening here. Why? I don't know. I'm not. If I had spiritual insight, maybe I would know. But
Because otherwise, there's no reason to go to a mikveh.
yeah, this is the Torah set the laws. Mikvah, nightfall, carbon the next day. Not for everybody. Some people just need mikvah and nightfall. But assuming in this case the person needs mikvah, nightfall, and carbon the next day. Assuming that's the case. So again, Abba Shaul says we take a person who's gone to mikvah, so he's in the beginning stage of his purification. He has to wait for nightfall, and the next day is carbon, and we turn him into a number 1 for as far as sacrificial food goes, as far as Kodshim goes. And therefore he can touch one thing, make that impure. That in turn touches something else, makes that impure. It's number 3. And that impure touches something else, makes that impure. It's number 4, and it stops there. That would be exactly like Rabbi Yossi. But at the moment, as I mentioned, the Gemara is rejecting the notion that Rabbi Yossi would go with the minority opinion. Okay. Opinion number 2. Rabbi Meir says, Metama echad u'poisel echad. It doesn't go. We don't turn him into. See, we don't turn this person into a primary or into a number 1. We keep him at status number 2, right? Because he touched the sheretz, he's number 2, right? He is a number 2. Let's make sure I got this right. Yeah, he's a number 2. And then, therefore, Metame echad, he makes 1 degree away from him by touching it impure. Upaisel echad, and then it in turn turns something else into a impure. So you said Rabbi Meir agrees with Abba Shaul that there is such a thing as a 4th degree impurity for Kodshim. So Rabbi Yossi can go with either Rabbi Meir or Abba Shaul.
Because you still have enough to get.
You still have number, exactly. The question is though, if he's number 1 or not. So in other words, Abba Shaul said the guy who's gone to mikvah hasn't gone, he's number 1, and therefore there's 2, 3, 4. Rabbi Meir said no, he's number 2, and therefore he has 3 and 4. It still works. It still works. So Rabbi Yossi can go with either Abba Shaul or Rabbi Meir, but it's still both the minority opinion. The sages say, in the same way, he confers only 1 degree away from him as far as eating or drinking Truma goes. So so too, he only confers 1 degree step away from him for eating sacrificial food or drinking sacrificial food. So the sages say, stop making it a 4th degree for Kodshim. It's only 3 degrees. He's number 2, and he can go to another one, number 3, for Teruma and for Kodesh equally. So presumably, Rabbi Yossi would follow the Chacham, and this is Rabbi Meir's, what Rabbi Yochanan is saying.
So Rabbi Yochanan is saying.
Yeah. So Rabbi Yossi concluded that there is a 4th degree for Kodshim. How did he conclude that? Because the guy whose night fell, and he hasn't taken his carbon yet, he may eat Truma, but will confer impurity to Kodesh. So the more so, a number 3, which is impure for Truma, definitely it's going to make Kodesh impure. Says Rabbi Yochanan, well, back up 1 stage and ask the sages what they think. A guy whose night hasn't even fell yet. And the sages say, keep Teruma and Kodesh equal. Only 1 degree away from him, that's it. So why are you jumping to a 3rd degree? Even though Rabbi Abishol and Rabbi Meir both agree that there is a 4th degree for Kodesh, just a question of whether he's number 1 or not. Yeah, so at this point, the Gemara is suggesting, or assuming, Rabbi Yochanan is assuming that Rabbi Yossi would follow the sages. I think someone took it, right?
I pressed it.
Oh, you pressed it.
But whatever. So if somebody itches here.
Yeah, I think he's there. So we took care of it. Yeah. Okay, we clear where we are? So far. So now let's ask the Gemara's question, and tomorrow we'll get to the Gemara's answer. The Gemara's question is quite simply. Maska for Rav Papa raises the following objection. So I think I mentioned once that the way the Gemara introduces a question, you know what kind of question it is. Yeah? And when the Gemara says Iboye, then you know it's an inquiry, meaning the questioner has no agenda, just wants to know. If you have the word Meisvei, it means we're going to quote a text greater than the one who spoke. So if the person who speaks is a sage from the Gemara, we're quoting from the Mishnah. If the person speaking is a Mishnah, we'll quote from a verse, from scripture. If you have the word Rami, then that means we're asking a contradiction between 2 texts that are of equal standing. 2 Mishnahs, 2 sages from the Gemara, 2 verses. But if you have the word Maskif, then that means the question is logical deduction. I'm not quoting any source, I'm challenging you based on a rational deduction. And that's what Rav Papa is doing. Maskif for Rav Papa raises the following rational objection towards Rabbi Yochanan's issue. Mimai, why are you concluding that Rabbi Yossi Karabanan Svirale? Why are you concluding that Rabbi Yossi follows the sages and then asking why he's making a 4th degree for Kodshim, for sacrificial? Dimel Kabashar Svirale. Maybe he follows Abishol. Abishol, who does say there's a 4th degree. Rashi points out that the Gemara could have also asked from Rabbi Meir, because we noted Rabbi Meir also makes 4th degree, right? Abishol and Rabbi Meir agree that Kodshim goes 4th degree. The question is, if the person's gone to mikvah, is he number 1 or is he number 2? But they both agree he goes to 4th degree. But Abishol goes even farther. We turn him into number 1. Yeah. So the Gemara is saying we could even make him look at Abishol, and certainly look at Rabbi Meir. That's how Rashi explains it. Sfirale, maybe Rabbi Yossi follows that. The Amar, which he says, which Abishol says, Rabbi Abishol is the one who said that we take the guy who's gone to mikveh, night hasn't fell yet, and we turn him into a number 1 as far as Kodshim goes. And therefore he can make 1 impure, another impure, and then a 4th puzzle. Or 3rd puzzle making it 4 from him. So why are you, Rabbi Yochanan, saying, I don't understand what Rabbi Yossi is thinking. And you're basing that on the fact that he follows the sages. When right in the same text, you have 2 other opinions that would match Rabbi Yossi. So just say Rabbi Yossi goes with them. What's the problem? So the Gemara tomorrow is going to explain why Rabbi Yossi can't be following Abishol, because Abishol's reasoning for how he came to this conclusion is contrary to how Rabbi Yossi came to this conclusion. And the manner in which Rabbi Yossi came to the conclusion must follow the sages, making it a question. And this is what we're going to do tomorrow, God willing.
I don't know how these guys slept at night.
They didn't. They didn't. They learned and learned. They didn't sleep at night.
Aggravation.
Yeah. As we remind ourselves all the time, this is Hashem's Torah, and that's the point here. Exercise our mind in God's Torah and connecting in the deepest way. Okay, wonderful day, Eden. More God willing tomorrow.
I'm missing something here.
What are we missing?
They're all coming, the conclusions are all the same.
Not for the sages. The sages said keep Teruma and Kodesh equal.
But they all agree that Kodshim can receive 4th degree.
Not the sages.
Not the sages.
The sages said that the Tful Yoim, the guy's gone to mikvah, night hasn't fell yet, he's number 2.
He's number 2.
And therefore, in the same way he only gets to number 3 for Teruma, he only gets to number 3 for Kodesh. That was the sages.
That was the sages. That was Rabbi Yochanan's opinion.
And Rabbi Yochanan saying that Rabbi Yossi should be following the sages. So why is Rabbi Yochanan concluding that there is a 4th degree?
So the sages are also saying, as Rabbi Yochanan is saying, that Kodshim only receives 3rd degree.
Rabbi Yossi clearly stated
that Rabbi,
this undermines the Kal V'chomer of Rabbi Yossi. Because Rabbi Yossi took the next stage,
right,
the person whose night fell, right, Rabbi Yossi took the next stage. The night fell, and he can eat Truma, but confers to Kodesh. And he used that as a Kal V'chomer for 3rd degree, which can't be Truma.
They said,
well, back up a stage.
What if it's not nightfall?
What if it's not nightfall? And the sages say it only goes 1 degree, but you're taking the next stage where it goes to 4th degree. That's what Rabbi Yossi is. That's Rabbi Yochanan's problem. But at this moment, the Gemara is asking, okay, so Rabbi Yossi follows Abba Shaul and Rabbi Meir, who say it does go 4th degree, who say that Kodshim does go a step further than Teruma. Why are you lumping Rabbi Yossi with the sages? But we're going to see in a moment. We'll see tomorrow why.
What year was that?
These discussions? 2,000 years ago, or less. Maybe 1,800 years ago, something like that.
You weren't born yet.
No.
They had clocks in those days.
How they figured out sunset?
Yeah,
that's a good question. How they figured out sunset?
It's a cloudy day.
Yeah, well, they had very,
Rabbi was a genius in that, right?
they had very complex math to figure out to predict when the sun's setting and so on.
Mhm.
There was a tree in the distance.
That's right. Famous story.
Especially the Rambam.
He wrote a whole complex math to figure out exactly when the sun's setting. And okay, have a wonderful evening. The Rambam. Have a wonderful day.